1453, providing a tax exemption for medical cannabis patients. And this is brought to us by Chair Wiley. And so we're going to have a staff briefing, and then we will have you just talk to us from right here in your chair. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairs and Committee. Peter Clodfelter, staff to the committee. House Bill 1453 relates to providing a tax exemption for medical cannabis patients. And this bill would provide a tax exemption from the 37% cannabis excise tax for qualifying patients and designated providers who have a recognition card on their purchases of cannabis products that are labeled as Department of Health compliant product and have been tested in accordance with the Department of Health's rules. So just to back up and provide some context for the bill, so that's the change in the bill. To give you some context, currently qualifying patients and designated providers can get an authorization for medical cannabis from their healthcare professional. They then have a choice to voluntarily participate in the state medical cannabis authorization database and be issued a recognition card. That's an option. If they choose to do that, then under current law, they would have an exemption from sales and use tax on purchases of cannabis products that are labeled as Department of Health compliant products, but they would not currently have an exemption from the primary 37% excise tax. So this bill would provide that exemption, and it would only cover purchases of products that have gone through this extra layer of Department of Health quality assurance screening. So that's an optional avenue that cannabis producers and processors can choose to have their products, in addition to being subject to the LCB's mandatory tests, can have them be subject to another layer of Department of Health tests, and then if they pass, can bear a label that's been developed by the Department of Health. And so those types of products would be the only ones available in this exemption. But I think that covers all the bill. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I am not seeing any questions other than my own about where is the iPad with all the names on it. But we can go ahead and hear from our charming sponsor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Sharon Wiley from America's Vancouver in the 49th District. I'm also the only one on this committee that was here on what was then the committee to implement our cannabis legislation. We had many, many hearings from people that wanted to get into the recreational market. We had testifiers that had very, very serious medical issues for whom cannabis had been helpful. And the big difference, I think, one of the big differences between alcohol and gambling and cannabis is that alcohol and gambling are not prohibited at the federal level. They're not prohibited substances, but cannabis is. In addition, cannabis is serious medicine for some people for very serious ailments. We felt at the time that as this unrolled, there would be medical providers and recreational providers, and that we would roll them in, and there would be a separation between people who pretended to need it medically and people that needed it medically. It didn't quite work out the way we planned. A lot of our medical providers got out of the business. We had a development of many, many recreational providers because there was a perception that it was going to be very profitable. We still have many people who need cannabis. We still need research. But in the meantime, this bill would take the tax, the heavy 37% tax, off of medical cannabis. It's very expensive. It works for some people, and I am proud to sponsor this bill because I think we need to do something different. And when you're second in the nation to do something innovative, sometimes you have to make changes. And I think now is the time to take 10 years out, to take a thorough look at a lot of the things that we have and figure out how to do it better. And this is one small way that we can help medical patients. Thank you.
All right. I don't see any questions for the sponsor. This is a pretty straightforward bill, and so we will go ahead and my Vice Chair Stearns is going to start calling people up. I am going to set a timer for just 2 minutes, though, so we can try to get everybody an opportunity as much as possible before our meeting cuts off. So, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we will have a panel of 3 people coming up first. Mr. Burl Bryson, Mr. Matthew Friedlander, and Mr. Stephen Field. And then after that, we will go to some remote testimony. Mr. Stephen Field and Mr. Donald Guzman will be up after that remotely. No, never mind. Stephen Field was up twice. He's listed as remote and in person. Oh, we'll figure that out.
All right. Mr. Bryson, if you want to go ahead and start.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Kloba, Chair Wiley, and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Burl Bryson. I'm the Executive Director of the Cannabis Alliance. We're the largest member-driven industry organization in Washington, and we're dedicated to the advancement of a vital, ethical, equitable, and sustainable cannabis industry in Washington. We represent the cannabis industry and community at large, including patients and consumers and all those that benefit from cannabis. I became a medical patient almost 20 years ago. Producing quality medicine for patients is why I got into the cannabis industry and gave up my law practice. Providing cannabis to patients and working with them directly, I got to know the stories of people who were profoundly ill and for whom cannabis was a life-altering medicine. I began to understand that a natural plant-based medicine without the dangers and side effects of pharmaceuticals should be ubiquitously available to people in need. The fact is that modern pharmacology is still not able to replicate the efficacy of this simple plant medicine, which is so dynamically effective for so many ailments, for so many people. It's profound. When I-502 was passed, I think it was with the mindset of taking this relatively harmless plant and allowing adults to make the decision to use it without severe negative legal consequences. What was forgotten was the robust medical system that was already in place in the state. The 502 system phased out all of the legacy medical dispensaries and forced everyone into the adult use system with a 37% excise tax. In this move, the true medical patients were left out. People with health challenges that are often least able to afford their medicine were forced to pay huge sums or seek unregulated market where they could not be sure their medicine was tested and safe. As a result, the medical market in Washington has nearly been obliterated. A recent private survey found that only about 70 of the 250 retail locations listed on the LCB website as medical providers are capable of registering patients onto the registry. There's only 4 DOH-compliant producers and only about 10,000 patients on our registry, which is the lowest per capita in the U.S. It's almost pointless to go through the hoops to get on the registry to save only the sales tax. The medical system in Washington is on the verge of collapse.
Can you wrap up?
Thank you for the opportunity to testify on behalf of patients and on behalf of this bill. I'm happy to address any questions that you have.
All right. I don't see any, so go ahead, Mr. Friedlander.
Hello, Co-Chairs Kloba and Wiley, and members of the committee. Thank you for having us today. My name is Matthew Friedlander. I'm the treasurer of the Cannabis Alliance and CEO and co-founder of Skagit Organics. We are a licensed processor and currently one of only 4 companies in the state that creates Department of Health compliant medical cannabis products. We occupy a unique spot in our industry as the largest supplier of DOH compliant product in Washington and one of the only companies that actively engages directly with individual patients on a regular basis. From our own experience and from the voices of patients themselves, the medical cannabis market in Washington is on the verge of collapsing. We used to have a thriving medical market here in Washington state, and during the lead up to the creation of our current industry, there were assurances made to the medical cannabis community that the passage of I-502 and a new recreational market would not adversely affect them. Unfortunately, that has not been the case. There's also a lot of confusion surrounding our medical cannabis program with very little tested and compliant product to choose from, few available medical consultants, and little incentive for a business or patient to participate. Washington has the lowest number of registered cannabis patients in the country when comparing states with medical cannabis programs, and the lowest on record for our own state since the inception of the program. In large part, this is due to the highest cannabis excise tax in the nation at 37%. Medical cannabis is also the only medicine in our state subject to this type of tax. Currently, registered patients only receive the exemption on the sales tax. They're often on fixed incomes, and the removal of this tax will help them afford the medicine that they need, medicine that their doctor has recommended. During our engagement through the patient committee hosted by the Cannabis Alliance and through our own work, we have heard directly from patients that the removal of this excise tax will result in a wider variety of DOH-compliant products, better access to certified consultants, and an increase in the number of registered patients, and will help them afford the medicine they rely on. I ask you to approve this bill. Thank you.
Oh, question? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is it Mr. Bryson?
Yeah.
Do you know what percentage of the sales at the retail level are medical?
0.5%.
Okay, so I was looking for the fiscal note since we didn't have it
The fiscal
yet.
note on this is tiny.
Yeah, okay.
Last year it was done, I think it was about $50,000 on the virtually the same bill.
Great, thank you.
All right, and so we have Mr. Stephen Field joining us from home. Go ahead when you're ready.
Good afternoon or evening. Can you hear me now?
We can see you and hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you, co-chairs Kloba, Wiley, and the committee. My name is Stephen Field. I was diagnosed at the age of 21 with multiple sclerosis in 1991. This diagnosis left me immediately disabled when I could not bend my legs and the lower part of my body went completely numb. After I was diagnosed and already in significant pain, and regardless of my neurologist's advice against its use, I moved to Washington years later because of the availability of medical marijuana. I've been through a range of disabilities from being able to walk to being bedridden on a soft diet, unable to feed myself. Now I spend most of my time in a power wheelchair, but I'm not in pain like I used to be. I used to take all sorts of pharmaceutical drugs, including a pain pump, which delivered baclofen, morphine, and Klonopin directly into my spine. I've also taken tizanidine, antidepressants, various sleeping pills, and of course, drugs to treat all the side effects. And all these drugs have various cognitive impairments, which the medical marijuana helps relieve. And these drugs also caused me to develop heart disease, heart failure, and eventually a stroke in December of 2019, which has actually taken me close to 3 years to recover. And I'm actually stood up in the shower for the first time a week or so ago. It was determined that the interthecal drugs needed to stop. I spent many weeks in the ICU as I weaned off these drugs. I spent time at 2 different rehab centers. I used the cannabis to deal with the side effects of the drugs and also to control the pain and the spasticity and the numerous other symptoms caused by the MS. The reduction, the release of the sales tax exemption would help make the cannabis much more affordable to everyone. It's very out of reach and unaffordable to most people right now because of this excise tax. So please just release this tax. It's our medicine. That's all. Please. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing that and illustrating the point so beautifully. We have Mr. Guzman is next. Staff is way ahead of it. We can go ahead and start when you're ready.
Thank you, co-chairs Kloba, Wiley, and committee for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 1453. My name is Donald Guzman. I'm a bud tender in Bellevue, Washington, a trained medical cannabis consultant, a registered medical cannabis patient, and a member of the Cannabis Alliance. I'm also an advocate for medical cannabis patients, many of whom are military veterans and senior citizens with set incomes. Cannabis is not just for stoners. Cannabis might be the medicine needed by a military veteran to promote hunger while progressing through chemotherapy. It could also be the medicine to release pain tension from a wreck 20 years in the past. DOH medical cannabis cost should not be the impetus for choosing between natural wellness medicine and putting healthy, nutritional food on the table. Many medical patients that I see spend $600 to $800 a month on their cannabis wellness. Vacating the 37% tax for medical patients should be financially beneficial and ease the stress that's caused by the high cost of medical cannabis right now. Please vote yes for HB 1453. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chair. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we do that, Ranking Member Chambers, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Mr. Friedlander, since you're producing the medical grade cannabis, one thing that I guess I've learned is that medical patients tend to gravitate towards the higher potency product. Is that primarily what you produce, or can you give us some perspective on that?
Yeah, most of our products are in the kind of middle range for potency. They are in the 50 or 60% range. We make a unique style of oil called RSO, which is very sought after for its lower cannabinoid content than, say, dabs or isolates, and because of the presence of many of the other plant constituents in the oil itself. But so yeah, we're in the 50-60% range. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then on to the next folks we need to hear from.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So we will have an in-person panel next. We'll call up Mr. Justin Nordhorn, Mr. Ezra Eckmeyer, and Ms. Dawn Darrington, and they will be followed by a remote panel of Mr. Michael Schermerhorn, Mr. Jay Jones, and Mr. Jim McRae.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Nordhorn.
Thank you, Madam Chairs and members of the committee. My name is Justin Nordhorn. I'm the Director of Policy and External Affairs for the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. And we're here in support of 1453 today. Over the last several years, I think it's important to point out that we've been working with some of the patient community on some of the issues that have come forward after 5052. And I think we can all recognize that the interest and intent of 5052 didn't really pan out. We don't see that many people in the register, as you heard. We don't see much product on the shelves. When we're looking at the issue, I think that there needs to be some other incentives for production of this product, as well as for consumers to utilize the resources from the registration. So when you see the issues that are out there, we also have a project going on right now with a researcher who's a master's student, and she's looking at some of these in a preliminary survey that was just run. Showcased a few things I wanted to highlight here. So when we're talking about affordability, the folks who are utilizing the product for consumption or for the medical purposes, only 55% said they could not afford the products at this particular point in time. We also have the highest, most common reason for people not utilizing the medical registry is they don't see a benefit. The second one was it's too time consuming, and the third one is it's too expensive. And so when we're looking at trying to support the patients in Washington State, we at the LCB believe that it's important to take a look at these gaps that have been identified and do what we can to help support these patients. So we would appreciate support of 1453. Thank you.
Hello, excuse me, Ezra Eichmeyer, representing Producers Northwest. I'm here in very, very strong support of this legislation. It's long overdue that we start taking medical cannabis seriously again. You know, a little bit of institutional memory here. You know, in the beginning of medical cannabis, it was basically an authorization to go to your doctor and get a slip of paper that said, go ahead and go experiment with weed for a year and come back and let me know if it's working for you and I'll re-up you. And thank God that was available for people who really needed it. It also led to some abuses in the past, and that's why there was some of the laws now are overly restrictive, and the tax was applied. The consequences now of today's scenario is that a lot of patients are not even bothering going to their doctors or not actually getting care with a medical professional, and if they have a real serious condition that requires sometimes $1,000 or more a month worth of RSO, the type of product that was mentioned earlier, a specific type of extract, to help them survive cancer, they have to go to the illicit market for that. You know, a recent study confirmed what we've been saying for years, which is 25% of cannabis sales in the state are still within the illicit market, and some percentage of that is medical patients looking for affordable medicine to try to stay alive. I've had friends beg me personally to try to help them find RSO on the market when they're trying to survive stage 4 cancer. And I'm not ashamed to say that I went and found it for them because it was affordable, being grown by people who were doing it just to keep people alive, barely even being profitable. This tax has been such a detriment to the evolution of medical cannabis. And our vision for the next medical cannabis 2.0 is the development of products like some of the people in this room are putting out with their companies, where they're putting together pills that doctors can prescribe and understand with cannabinoid profiles that are standardized. We need the doctors to also be working with patients to start learning from what's working and what's not, to be able to be giving more specific direction to the patients. But with this tax in place, it ruins all of that. It's literally stifled the evolution of medical cannabis. So this is even more about just compassion. This is also about taking this, maximizing the usefulness of medical cannabis and mainstream medical practice. Thank you.
Okay, and then our final panelist, go ahead.
I am Dawn Darrington. I am not here representing any kind of company or profit-making organization. I have been testifying in Olympia for a couple of decades about this topic. I am very committed, and I've been angry since 502 passed out of what has happened to the medical cannabis world. It's been horrible. We were promised safe, affordable, medical-grade access. We have not had that at all. I am 77 years old. I am dealing with my second bout of cancer. Cannabis is an incredibly important part of my regimen, and even my oncologist at Kaiser concurs with that. I have managed to become stable and have my cancer shrink when I have been diagnosed with terminal cancer. I am fortunate. I have access, because of my long-standing in the marijuana community, I have access to the cannabis that I need, organic. It has to be organic to be medical. I have access. Most patients do not. I have knowledge. Most patients do not. Patients need to have access. I don't know why the state of Washington decided that cancer, lupus, MS, epilepsy, and a number of other conditions are sins in this state. I don't know what I did that was so sinful. I have not been a perfect person my whole life, but I don't think I've ever done anything to anybody under any circumstance that would warrant being given a sin diagnosis by representatives in the state of Washington. Needless to say, I am in tremendous support of this. I'm sorry, Justin, the LCB should have done their homework a long time ago and designated who the good medical players were and who the fakers were. We all knew who they were, but nobody would talk to us to have that conversation. So medical has been killed. Patients have been driven absolutely to the illegal market, which was also a mandate of the LCB to try to curb. I have seen very little evidence of that. Patients should not have to go to a recreational store to get on the registry. We should be able to go to the health department. That's like having to go to a bar in order to walk into a liquor store to buy a bottle of beer.
Could you wrap up
That's
for
also
us?
inappropriate. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I got on a roll.
I know. All right, Mr. Vice Chair.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. So, yes.
So sorry.
Don't go away, Mr. Eichenmeyer.
Yes, sir.
Almost escaped. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Eichenmeyer, from your testimony, is it fair to draw the conclusion you believe that poorly structured taxes drive people to illicit markets?
In this situation, absolutely. This is the tax rate on recreational is a part of the issue, but that's separate from this bill. On the medical side, look, the stuff RSO is an extract, and somebody going through cancer needs as much as a gram a day, and that can cost them over $1,000 a month, and they need a 3-month regimen of it. So, you know, when people are in extreme health conditions, it usually also puts them in extreme financial distress. So they're at the most vulnerable moment in their life. They have no healthcare support for this, and then to think about them also paying for doctor's visits on top of it all to get actual direction on the use of the cannabis, they just go self-medicate, they self-diagnose and go straight to the illicit market. We know this is happening. I can't tell you to what extent, but yeah, this tax structure is driving people to the illicit market 100%. And away from the doctor's office.
All right, and Ranking Member Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when a patient has cancer, are they typically, and they're using RSO, the product that you mentioned, are they also doing traditional, chemo cancer treatment and this on top of it, or do they stop that and do one versus the other?
It's all over the place. I had a friend once who was using RSO exclusively, and he went into remission from stage 4 cancer just using cannabis oil. Another thing is we really need a lot of R&D to see what's really going on with this stuff. We have a lot of anecdotal stories to tell from like this, but yeah, it's a mixed bag out there, what people are doing. A lot of cancer treatments now, though, I have to say, my mom went through cancer, and it was just an automatic cannabis authorization card from the treatment center. It's being standardized, but it's still a bit more or less a here, go use whatever products might work for you kind of authorization. It's not specific, medical practice like what we're used to, prescribing specific types of pills or medicines with specific dosages and times to use and all things like that. That's where we're hoping to take medical cannabis in the future, to integrate it into mainstream medical practice.
All right, great. Representative Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't doubt that there's, and I've heard, and your story is compelling as well, that there's a use. But how do we stop the floodgates from opening, from young people just going to a doctor and, my back hurts, or I can't sleep at night, or whatever, just so they get the card, just so they get the tax exemption, just so they get the higher THC?
Can I just interrupt for 1 second, because I know I'm mindful of the folks we've got on a list here, and I think that question is less about like this tax thing and into something that we all do care about, which is youth access, but there's kind of already some things set up. So I want to point you to the person who can give you the best answer, and so perhaps we can have a staff follow-up on that one. Thank you. All right. Mr. Vice President, I'm doing it again, Vice Chair.
I, again, willingly accept. The committee would next like to hear a remote panel consisting of Mr. Michael Schermerhorn, Mr. Jay Jones, and by phone, I believe, Mr. Jim McRae. And after that panel, we have a wrap-up panel of 2 people.
Hello.
Yep, we see you and hear you, so go ahead and begin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Michael Schermerhorn. I have sclerosis mesenteritis, which is a autoimmune disease on a planet with 8 billion people that only 300 of us have been diagnosed with. It's untreatable. There aren't positive prognoses of it. I have 13 doctors. I have over 100 doctor visits a year. I am the head care provider for Co-op 138. I've worked in 3 doctor offices prior to 2015, assigning medical authorizations. I worked in 3 of the largest authorizing doctors here on the West Coast and was responsible for authorizing 3,000 medical patients prior to 2015. In 2015, there was 30,000 medical marijuana authorizations here in the state of Washington. That number is decimated. The meeting places for people with cancers and rare diseases were dispensaries where we could talk about what was working for us and what wasn't, and what growers and providers were helping us with our lives and live long and strong, healthy. The people that in my cooperative left by dying, my father, my uncle, we're currently have people that have rare or untreatable diseases, such as Michelle Larson, who has a tube in her chest that goes into her heart where she takes water twice a day. She has stents in her brain, her heart, her liver, her kidneys, and her lower feminine regions. She uses Mr. Friedlander's product from Skagit Organics as much as we can get from them, but it's never enough. She's in the hospital more than I am and has over 100 visits, close to 200 visits a year. There is no chance for people like her or I who are homeless, but following compliance in every other way. Our authorizations are even paid for by our medical Affordable Health Care Acts.
Mr. Schumer,
you want to know where safe and affordable health supplies can come from us? It's from the people that really care in our communities and donate it, or the black market.
Mr.
The black
Schumer,
market,
can I
an
have you
ounce
wrap
of
up,
cannabis
please?
oil is $150.
Mr. Schumer, can I have you wrap up, please? We've given you your 2 minutes, and it is very compelling, and I know you do have a lot to say, but I want to make sure that everybody else can have their opportunity too. Thank you very much. Mr. Jay Jones, you're next. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jay Hicks Jones, and I currently reside in Everett, Washington. I'm here today to submit my testimony for the public record in show of support for HB 1453. I've lived in Washington State for over a decade now and am a TV producer, currently producing the A&E hit series Hoarders. I'm also a parent to a former cancer patient. My daughter, Hunter Rose, my little princess, was diagnosed with stage 4 high-risk neuroblastoma and treated at Seattle Children's Hospital from 2017 to 2020. She was 4. It was very challenging. Chemo, radiation, surgeries, stem cell transplants, immunotherapy, vaccine trials. It was very challenging mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but most of all, financially. She used cannabis all throughout her treatment. As a matter of fact, Seattle Children's provided her with a prescription for cannabis. And cannabis ended up being really amazing for her. It actually replaced several of her other narcotic prescriptions. She was one of the lucky ones. Sorry if I'm a little nervous. This means a lot to me. She made it. She's now 9. She's beautiful. She's doing amazing. However, I can't tell you how many times we came home from the doctor where we had shut-off notices on our door from the city. It was devastating financially. My wife had to leave her job. I couldn't travel as much for work. Every penny counts. And as a family who relied heavily on cannabis during the most traumatic time in our life, this House Bill 1453 would have been very beneficial to us. So I thank you for your time and allowing me to share my testimony, and I urge you to move forward with House Bill 1453.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chair, I think we're getting towards the end here.
We're getting there. Mr. Jim McRae.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. McRae, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. This is Dr. James McRae. I'm a resident of Legislative District 1, and way back before medical in this state came under regulation, I was a card-carrying patient. No longer. I was not willing to go into the registry and don't see benefits to it for all the reasons said. However, I am pro on this. I urge the committee to pass it out and try to drive it through the process. It is a very good bill. I'm a little surprised people don't have more of an ethical problem with taxing medicine. Other people have talked about this. I do want to give you a little bit of data, which is sort of what I do in my spare time, is follow the data in this industry. And a few things. The fiscal note from the LCB, it just dropped very recently, grossly underestimates the dollar amount of sales. They pulled the data from CCRS. CCRS is basically non-functioning for purposes of data summary and retrieval. So their number's way wrong. I think they came out with something on the order of $2,000 per year. The 0.5% of sales that one of the earlier testifiers mentioned would be some $6.8 million of fiscal year 22 sales. When you look at the Department of Revenue, it's only about 1.07%, $14.6 million during fiscal year 22 that were sales tax exempt. Now, a portion of those is not to medical cannabis patients because high CBD product is tax-free if people do it right. or it's sales tax-free, sales and use tax-free. So a couple of things on the destruction of medical. There are fewer, other people have said, than 15,000 patients registered. The Department of Health is not sure how many there are. They really aren't, but it's somewhere between 12 and 15,000, it would appear.
Dr. McCrae, can I interrupt you for 1 moment? Because you're not joining us visually, you can't see the timer. And so your 2 minutes are over. And I should have mentioned this before. We invite anyone who doesn't get a chance to testify, or if 2 minutes is not enough, to please submit written testimony, and we're happy to hear from you. 2 more people.
I will do that within the next 24 hours. Thank you very much, Chair.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Okay, next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our final 2 witnesses for the day are Mr. Micah Sherman and Mr. Lucas Hunter.
All right, Lucas, you won the race, and you get to go first.
All those years in the field and track doing me good.
That's right.
So good evening, Madam Co-Chairs. Name's Lucas Hunter. I'm representing Harmony Farms, a Tier 3 producer processor in Lacey, Washington. Most of what I had to say actually was mentioned prior, so I'd like to give kudos to many of the presenters before me. But in general, I just want to see the medical marketplace continue to grow, and encouraging more patients to register by lowering the tax rate and making medicine untaxed in the state of Washington. I do think that we'll see a great improvement in the amount of products that are going to be made available to these individuals. As a producer processor, we've looked at the feasibility of producing medical grade products. We unfortunately are not one of the 4 in the state, and that's purely because there isn't a large enough marketplace to design specialized products for medical marijuana patients, or medical cannabis patients rather. So I do urge the passage of this bill, and for the sake of time, I'll make sure I stop when the green light's green. Thank you, everyone.
All right, appreciate that very much. Go ahead, Mr. Sherman.
Hello, thanks chairs and the committee. My name is Micah Sherman. I'm here representing the Washington Sun and Craft Growers Association, and I'm also really representing my my own business today, Raven. We're a Tier 2 producer processor here in Olympia, and we're heavily focused on mixed ratio genetics, and we do a lot of breeding and product development around low THC, high THC, and mixed ratio cannabis strains, cultivars. And all of those products are focused on medical patients that aren't necessarily captured in the medical market. So we really do appreciate this bill. It's going to do a lot for us to enable us to do more of that kind of work. We do it right now basically for, at a loss, because there's not really the sort of market for those things. But the stories we get from people that consume those products are very powerful, and anything that can be done to make the development of that part of our industry a bigger focus is going to be great. And I think using variable tax rates to that end is a very intelligent policy, and we appreciate this effort very much, and will make a big difference in the continuation of that work and the easing of people's sufferings as a result. So thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. I don't see any questions of this panel, so thank you. But we do have a little bit more time, and I had to cut Assistant Ranking Member Robertson off earlier in the interest of getting through everyone. And now that we have, I believe you have a question of Mr. Nordhorn. If you could return, that would be
Madam Chair.
great. Thank you.
I think you heard the question earlier. I don't doubt that there's medical marijuana is a need and good for some people. However, what stops me, for example, going and getting a prescription to avoid the tax?
Sure. In this particular bill, the way it's crafted, obviously Liquor and Cannabis Board is very concerned about youth access, but the way that it's crafted in this bill, you have to be a registered patient, and you're going to prove that at the point of sale, and it has to be Department of Health compliant product, which goes through additional testing requirements. And so I think that the parameters in this particular bill are fairly narrow to support those patients, and there wouldn't be much of an incentive for an independent person to go to a doctor, get an authorization, go to the store, get a card, and then go seek out the product that's, as you heard, fairly limited on the market at this point in time. So without those incentives for the patients to even come in, there's really no incentive for the standard consumer to try to game that system, I think. So I think given the scope of this particular language that was presented, I don't see that risk is increasing the way it once was perceived in the open market when people were just getting authorizations. I don't know if that helps or not.
Another one. Go ahead.
Maybe take another stab at it. So it doesn't require a specific diagnosis, like we've heard from patients with cancer diagnosis, MS.
To go into from my understanding, to go into the registry, you have to have a qualifying condition.
Qualifying condition. So there's a list of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once you have you've been diagnosed with a qualifying condition, you go to your doctor provides the authorization, then you can get into the Department of Health registry.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, and Representative Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any reason in the difference between medical product and recreational product that a person would want to game the system to get access to medical other than a tax advantage?
Not really. I can't perceive that there would be an advantage for somebody to game the system for that. We've seen, and I believe in other presentations, that we have, based on some surveys, about 90% of the folks surveyed are coming through the adult use market. So to deviate from that, to go through, quite frankly, a number of additional steps that they would have to go, I'm not sure would be a value added to that particular person for what they're going to get. Whereas the patient, I think that they're seeking some particular product, and also the cost for the patients. When you have to go to the doctor repetitively, that's expensive in and of itself. And so the cost of the tax relief is not the only cost that the patients already endure. It's also the going to the doctor, getting the authorizations and those types of things. So it's a fairly costly process to get in there. If you don't have to do that, you probably just go buy it.
All right, thank you. And thank you for sticking around so that we could finish up and have those questions answered. So I believe we are done with all of our business for today. And so seeing no objection, we are adjourned.